New cam. Footage exposes the lies about Tyler Robinson, who truly had that shot. Charlie Kirk case tonight, a revelation that could turn an entire case upside down. New camera footage has surfaced in the Charlie Kirk shooting investigation. Footage that may expose the lies, the cover-ups, and the truth about who really pulled that trigger. For months, the world was told that Tyler Robinson, a 22-year-old drifter with a checkered past, was the man behind the gun. The one who ended a public figure's life and shattered a movement. The story spread fast. Headlines screamed guilt, and the court of public opinion closed its case before the real evidence ever had a chance to speak. But now, this new footage, hidden, ignored, or perhaps deliberately buried, paints a very different picture. Please make sure you comment while listening to this update. We will make sure we respond to everything. That's a proof that we are fighting for justice and what is right. In it, a figure moves through the shadows near the scene of the shooting, taller, dressed differently, positioned at an angle the official reports never mentioned. And for the first time, we are forced to ask, did Tyler Robinson ever have that shot at all? What else was hidden from the public, and why? As the footage unravels, so does the state's entire narrative, from DNA claims that don't align, to timestamps that defy logic. The more we see, the more the question grows louder. If the evidence doesn't fit the story, then who wrote the story we were meant to believe? This isn't just about guilt or innocence. It's about power, perception, and the cost of a rushed conclusion. Because when the truth hides behind headlines, even justice can lose its aim. Tonight, we reopen the file and follow the new trail of light that's beginning to expose the lies. Before we dive into this story, remember this is Detective Kate, True Crime, a channel that stands for justice and giving every case the attention it deserves. Drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from. Hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you don't miss any of our investigations. And don't forget, share your thoughts and theories below. Every clue counts. It was a warm September evening in Orem, Utah, a night meant for speeches, applause, and the kind of energy that fills a room when politics meets passion. Charlie Kirk stood at the podium, smiling, addressing a crowd of students and supporters under bright stage lights. Then, in an instant, everything changed. A single, sharp crack split the air. Screams followed. Panic swept through the courtyard as people dove for cover, unsure where the danger came from. Within seconds, the scene descended into chaos. Cell phones dropped, security rushed forward, and confusion reigned. By the time the smoke cleared, Charlie Kirk was down, and the story that would dominate headlines had already begun to write itself. Police scanners buzzed with a single name, Tyler Robinson. 22 years old, alone, frightened, found 2 blocks away, running in the wrong direction. By morning, his face was on every major network, labeled the suspect, the drifter, the shooter. The public believed the story because it was simple, fast, and neatly packaged. But as the hours passed, that simplicity began to crumble. Witnesses gave clashing accounts. Some swore they heard 2 shots, not 1. Others described a tall figure in dark clothing crouched near a van that disappeared from evidence the next day. And then came the unanswered question that still haunts investigators. If every angle of that event was recorded, why was only one camera's footage ever released? That night, what began as tragedy became something larger, a puzzle of missing minutes, shifting timelines, and a story too quick to be true. September 10th, 2025, Utah Valley University, Orem, a Turning Point USA event packed with students and supporters filled the air with energy and applause. Charlie Kirk stood at the center of it all, confident and commanding, his words echoing through the night. Then, at precisely 7:42 p.m., the sound that changed everything broke through the noise. A single gunshot. The crowd froze, then chaos exploded. Screams, panic, people ducking for cover as confusion swept through the courtyard. Some swore they heard 1 shot, others 2. Security rushed toward the stage, while others scattered toward the exits. Within minutes, the scene was flooded with flashing lights and the sharp bark of police commands. Officers sealed the area, combing through terrified faces and trembling witnesses. Near the east exit, they stopped a young man, 22-year-old Tyler Robinson. He was breathless, disoriented, and frightened. To the officers on scene, that was enough. They had their suspect, a supposed motive, and a weapon soon to be linked. The narrative fell neatly into place, quick, simple, and satisfying for the headlines waiting to print. But as the cameras rolled and the statements piled up, subtle cracks began to form in the story's surface. The timeline didn't quite fit. The evidence seemed too perfect. And what began as an open and shut case was, in truth, the start of a much darker and more complicated mystery. Prosecutors wasted no time. Within days, they built what looked like an unshakable case against Tyler Robinson. They unveiled a rifle, allegedly found on a nearby rooftop, a towel marked with traces of Robinson's DNA, and text messages said to contain a confession. To the public, it sounded airtight, clean evidence, clear motive, open and shut. But behind the glossy press releases and courtroom soundbites, cracks were forming in the foundation. The supposed confession texts, they weren't verified data, just screenshots with no digital trail. The DNA evidence, partial, faint, and found on a towel that had been handled by at least 3 different people before it was ever tested. And the rifle, the centerpiece of the prosecution, didn't even match early police photographs. Its serial plate had been tampered with, its ballistic signature inconsistent with the bullet removed from the scene. Still, the narrative held. News anchors repeated it night after night. Kirk, killer caught. It was easier to believe the story than to question it. Meanwhile, Tyler Robinson sat behind bars, insisting he'd been chased that night, not fleeing a crime scene, that he'd run from chaos, not caused it. But his words barely reached beyond the cell walls. The headlines had already spoken for him. And once the world believes a story, the truth becomes harder to hear. Every investigation has a breaking point, a detail so small, yet so powerful, it can rewrite everything we thought we knew. For this case, that moment came down to 2 missing minutes. Surveillance from a nearby gas station placed Tyler Robinson walking away from the scene, exactly 2 minutes before the fatal shot was fired. 2 minutes, insignificant to most, but impossible to ignore in the timeline of a murder. Prosecutors struggled to account for it. Their theory didn't fit the clock, and the evidence didn't fit their theory. Then came the footage, grainy, distant, but undeniable. A black van, pulling up behind the event center during those same missing minutes. The same van later captured in the cafe footage that was never shown in court. Its license plate blurred, its driver unseen. But from behind it, a shape emerges, calm, controlled, purposeful. The outline of a shooter who moves with precision, not panic. The kind of movement that suggests training, confidence, and intent. If this timeline holds true, Tyler Robinson was already blocks away when Charlie Kirk fell. Meaning, someone else, someone carefully hidden, stood in that shadow, took aim, and pulled the trigger. 2 minutes. That's all it took to unravel the story the world believed. The cafe owner remembers it clearly. The moment he realized what his security camera had captured. He says he offered the footage to police just days after the shooting, but they never came to collect it. Weeks later, when his system began to glitch, a private data recovery team was called in. What they recovered was chilling. The footage, though grainy, shows a tall figure, roughly 6'2", standing behind a black van near the back entrance of the event center. The figure is wearing what appears to be tactical gear, adjusting a scoped weapon aimed toward the stage. Tyler Robinson, by contrast, is 5'9" and was seen on a separate camera 2 blocks away at that exact time. Frame by frame, forensic analysts examined the video. The timestamp read 7 hours 41 minutes and 32 seconds. The precise moment official records mark the gunshot that ended Charlie Kirk's life. And yet this clip was never entered into discovery, never mentioned by investigators, never shown to the defense. Prosecutors insisted they had reviewed all available video evidence. But that statement, now proven false, hides something far deeper than negligence. Because if the public never saw this footage, and the jurors never knew it existed, how many of them might have voted differently? How many might have realized that the man on trial wasn't the one who pulled the trigger? When the case seemed sealed beyond doubt, a quiet but crucial voice entered the scene. Dr. Elena Vasquez, a respected forensic ballistics expert with over 2 decades of experience. She wasn't hired by the state, but by an independent investigative team, determined to review every overlooked detail. What she found changed everything. Her analysis revealed a fact the prosecution never mentioned in court. The bullet extracted from Charlie Kirk's body did not match the barrel markings of the rifle tied to Tyler Robinson. The bullet had 6 right-hand grooves, while the rifle produced 5 left-hand twists, 2 completely different ballistic signatures. In her report, Dr. Vasquez called it a scientific impossibility that the shot could have come from that weapon. The pattern was clear, the data irrefutable, yet none of it appeared in the state's evidence summary. When pressed about the omission, law enforcement claimed the results were still under pending analysis. But records obtained later showed that report was completed and filed weeks before Robinson's indictment. Someone had chosen not to disclose it. Whether through incompetence or deliberate concealment, the result was the same. A man was tried with evidence that physically could not support the charge. The question now wasn't just about guilt or innocence. It was about integrity, trust, and the shocking realization that the truth had been scientifically disqualified long before the verdict was ever reached. By the time the evidence began to fracture, the story had already hardened into stone. Every major network echoed the same headline: "Political radical kills conservative leader." It was clean, sensational, and tailor-made for a divided nation. On social media, the verdict came long before the trial ever began. Hashtags like #JusticeForKirk and #LockHimUp trended for weeks, while Tyler Robinson's name became synonymous with guilt. Yet, behind those headlines, another story was quietly unfolding. Inside the Utah Bureau of Investigation, tensions were rising. Officers spoke off the record about mounting political pressure, not to find the truth, but to finish the job. One senior investigator, whose identity remains protected, later confessed, "We were told to wrap it up fast. Optics mattered more than accuracy." That single statement, if proven true, points to something far more troubling than procedural error. It suggests obstruction at the highest levels, a deliberate manipulation of justice to serve a narrative. Meanwhile, the networks kept spinning, the pundits kept shouting, and the public moved on, convinced the case was solved. But it wasn't. Because as the noise grew louder, the real shooter, the tall figure from the cafe footage, vanished from every official report. No trace, no pursuit, no explanation. And somewhere out there, in the silence between politics and truth, the person who actually pulled that trigger may still be free. After months of silence and setbacks, the defense finally struck back. Tyler Robinson's legal team, now reinforced by a group of veteran capital case attorneys, filed a motion demanding a full review of the state's evidence. Their claim was simple, but explosive. Prosecutors had withheld exculpatory material, evidence that could have proven Robinson's innocence from the start. It was a direct violation of due process. Included in that motion were the 3 pillars of their argument: the cafe footage that police ignored, the ballistic report proving the bullet didn't match Robinson's rifle, and the missing witness statement from a security guard who swore he saw a different man flee the scene. Taken together, they painted a damning picture of a case built not on truth, but on convenience. Courtroom sketches showed Robinson sitting silently as his attorneys laid out the pattern, a trail of omissions, altered reports, and data inconsistencies that pointed to something far larger than human error. The next hearing, set for October 30th, is expected to be the moment everything changes. Robinson's defense plans to present independent forensic analysis, frame-by-frame video breakdowns, and ballistic simulations, demonstrating the physical impossibility of him firing the fatal shot. Their goal is clear: total dismissal of all charges, and a public acknowledgement of wrongful prosecution. But even as the evidence mounts, prosecutors remain steadfast, repeating the same line to reporters. The evidence against Mr. Robinson is substantial and consistent. Yet, as one analyst quietly observed, consistency doesn't mean truth. It only means the story hasn't changed, even when the facts have. The public reaction has been nothing short of explosive. Across social media, the debate rages on. A war of hashtags and headlines. #Free Robinson. #Justice for Kirk. #Show the footage. Millions have taken sides, each convinced they hold the truth. Protesters gather outside courthouses and police precincts, waving signs, demanding answers, while others chant for conviction and closure. It's no longer just about a shooting. It's about trust, accountability, and the deep fractures running through the nation's sense of justice. Activists accuse investigators of scapegoating Tyler Robinson to silence political outrage, claiming his arrest was more about calming the public than finding the truth. Meanwhile, those loyal to the original narrative insist the case was clear from the start, that questioning it is a betrayal of the victim's memory. Turning Point USA, the organization Charlie Kirk founded, continues to rebuild in the wake of loss. But within its walls, sources whisper of unease, of people who've seen the new footage and can no longer ignore what it shows. Erica Kirk, Charlie's widow, has publicly vowed to pursue the truth, no matter how uncomfortable it becomes. Insiders close to her say she has privately viewed the recovered cafe footage, and that it changed her perspective completely. Though she hasn't spoken publicly about what she saw, her silence speaks louder than any statement could. Now the nation stands divided, not just by politics, but by something far deeper: belief itself. What is truth? Who decides it? And in a world where evidence can vanish and stories can be rewritten, how many more lives will be caught between what's real and what's convenient to believe? So if Tyler Robinson didn't pull the trigger, who did? The question echoes through every corner of this case, whispered by those who've seen the footage and studied the evidence. Was it a hired hand, brought in to silence a voice, a political extremist, driven by ideology and hate, or, as some investigators now quietly suspect, someone within the event's own security detail, someone who knew the layout, the timing, the escape routes? The possibilities are chilling. Frame by frame, analysts dissect the shooter's movements. The posture is disciplined, the aim deliberate, the breathing measured, the signs of someone trained. This wasn't a moment of chaos or rage. It was execution-level precision. A single shot, perfectly placed, followed by a clean withdrawal into shadow. No wasted movement, no hesitation. Whoever fired that round wasn't improvising. They were following a plan. But that plan required access, knowledge of where Charlie Kirk would stand, where the cameras were placed, when security would shift positions. Information only someone on the inside could know. And that realization changes everything. Because if the shooter wasn't a stranger lurking in the crowd, then this wasn't a random act of violence. It was an operation. And if it was planned, by whom? A political rival seeking chaos, a power figure exploiting tragedy, or an orchestrated distraction meant to bury something even bigger. The closer investigators get to the truth, the clearer one thing becomes. The shot that killed Charlie Kirk may have been just the beginning of something far larger and far darker than anyone ever imagined. The Charlie Kirk assassination may forever stand as one of the most divisive and haunting cases in modern American history. A man accused before the evidence was seen, a nation divided before the truth was known, and a movement shaken to its very core. For months, the story was controlled, shaped by politics, fear, and the hunger for closure. But the emergence of new footage has torn open what was once sealed shut. It's exposed not just the lies told in courtrooms and newsrooms, but the deeper rot beneath, the way truth can be edited, delayed, or buried when it threatens the wrong people. Tonight, the world stands on the edge of revelation. Every frame, every timestamp, every overlooked detail points to something undeniable. Tyler Robinson may have been framed by a system too impatient to listen, too invested to question, and too powerful to be wrong. The bullet that killed Charlie Kirk didn't just pierce a man, it tore through the illusion of justice itself. And now, as the story reopens, one chilling truth remains. Sometimes, the evidence doesn't reveal the truth, it hides it. And as for Tyler Robinson, his name may soon be cleared, but the shadow that pulled the trigger still walks free. The real shooter's story has only just begun.